Picture this, a wall, literally dividing a city in two. Armed guards on both sides, staring each other down. This was Berlin during the Cold War, the ultimate symbol of the US-Russia standoff. The Cold War wasn't a war with tanks and bombs, at least not directly. It was a war of ideas, of capitalism versus communism. The US, the champion of freedom and democracy, faced off against the Soviet Union, a land shrouded in secrecy and ruled by an iron fist. The rivalry ran deep. Both nations stockpiled nuclear weapons, enough to destroy the world many times over. Fear and paranoia were constant companions. Every crisis, from Korea to Cuba, had the potential to spark a nuclear Armageddon. It was a time of spies, of propaganda, of a constant game of chess played on a global scale. But this rivalry didn't just appear out of thin air, it has roots going back over a century. Even before the Soviet Union, the US viewed Tsarist Russia with suspicion. Russia was a vast, enigmatic land ruled by autocrats. After the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, things got even more complicated. The communists, with their talk of worldwide revolution, scared the living daylights out of the West. The US even sent troops to fight against the Bolsheviks during the Russian Civil War. Then came World War II. The US and the Soviet Union were awkward allies fighting a common enemy in Nazi Germany. But even as they celebrated victory together, the seeds of mistrust had already been sown. Different ideologies, different visions for the post-war world, it was only a matter of time before the alliance crumbled. The Cold War was full of these flashpoints, moments where the world held its breath. In 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite to orbit Earth. Americans looked up at the sky, suddenly feeling vulnerable, like they were falling behind in a very important race. Then there was the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Soviet missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. Talk about a tense family reunion. For 13 days, the world teetered on the brink of nuclear annihilation. And let's not forget Afghanistan in the 1980s. The US supported Afghan fighters resisting Soviet occupation, further fueling the fire of the Cold War. It was a proxy war, a conflict fought on someone else's soil, with both superpowers pulling the strings. Red Scare to Putin's propaganda painting the enemy. So, with all this history, is it any surprise that Russia is often cast as the bad guy in the American narrative? The Cold War might be over, but its legacy lives on. During the McCarthy era in the 1950s, fear of communist infiltration gripped America. People were blacklisted, careers destroyed, all because of suspected communist sympathies. Fast forward to today, and we see echoes of this in the way Russia is portrayed. From election interference to cyber attacks, Russia under Vladimir Putin is often seen as a threat to democracy and the Western world order. State-controlled media in Russia plays its part, pushing narratives that clash with Western viewpoints. This constant back and forth, this clash of ideologies and interests, feeds into a cycle of mistrust and suspicion. It's a cycle that's hard to break. Hollywood's hammer and sickle syndrome. And let's be honest, Hollywood hasn't exactly helped matters. From Rocky IV to Red Dawn, American cinema has a long history of portraying Russians as the villains. Sure, it's just entertainment, but these portrayals seep into the public consciousness, reinforcing stereotypes and shaping perceptions. Think about the classic Cold War movies. Russians are always the stoic, emotionless baddies with thick accents and a penchant for world domination. It's almost comical if it weren't so potentially damaging. Of course, there are exceptions to this rule. There are films and TV shows that try to present a more nuanced view of Russia and its people. But for the most part, the Hollywood machine continues to churn out stories where Russia is the enemy, the threat lurking in the shadows. Beyond the headlines, understanding the narrative. The relationship between the US and Russia is complex, shaped by decades of mistrust, rivalry, and occasional cooperation. It's easy to fall into the trap of seeing things in black and white, of labeling one side as the good guy and the other as the bad guy. But the truth is always more complicated than that. Understanding the historical context, the cultural influences, and the political motivations at play is crucial if we want to move beyond simplistic narratives. It's about recognizing that there are shades of gray, that there are always multiple perspectives to consider. Want to dive deeper into the fascinating world of geopolitics, economics, and global affairs? Hit that like button and subscribe to Express Econ Finance Insights for more thought-provoking content.